What's up, Internet? You're tuned in to a very, very special episode 62 of the FlipScreen Games Podcast, a weekly video game podcast where two best buds from different nations come together to discuss the wide, wide world of video games. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined as always by my very good friend and co-host, Mr. Steven Radford. Steven, we have breaking news to kick off this episode. Not seconds before we click to record, we just officially hit 500 subscribers over on our YouTube channel. Thank you all so much for the support over the for all the support, but especially over the last month. It's been so awesome to see us literally double the number of people paying attention to the channel. Thank you guys so much. Whether you've been here since Lupots, whether you've, just joined us in the last week here, thank you so much for spending time with us and hanging out and being a part of the community and enjoying what we do and believing in it enough to show up. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah, definitely. I'll just echo what you said. It's been amazing to wake up every day and have comments and new subscribers and people watching our videos, and it's been the most successful month we've had since we started FlipScreen, and it's been nice to be able to experiment with new content and do new things and collaborate with you on cool videos and do more produced content, and people seem to be enjoying it. So hopefully, if this is your first time listening to the podcast, you enjoy this too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry, I literally have friends reaching out right now to tell me that it's awesome that we hit it. I'm going to be honest with you listeners too. I'm getting married this week. I'm very excited about that. I am also very stressed out right now. So it's been a busy couple days, and I got to say this was what I needed. I needed this good news, and I'm beaming. So we won't gush anymore. Thank you guys again so much for the support. We love you. Let's get into it. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about today, including some updates around the PlayStation DualSense. What is it? The Pro? It's got
Edge.
The Edge. The DualSense Edge.
Yeah, not the DualSense Bono. It just reminds me of that guy from U2. It's just some stupid name.
Yeah, with or without you, yeah.
I'm definitely going to be without it, that's for sure.
Well, we'll talk about that. As well as some controversy this week around 30 frames per second in modern gaming. It was in the news twice this week. So we're going to talk about it. Have we evolved beyond 30 FPS? Can gamers no longer tolerate it? And is that okay? So we're going to talk about that. But before we get into that, let me remind you that this episode and every episode of the FlipScreen Games podcast are brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of October. They are, of course, Christian Oliveria, Christopher Valenz, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, a.k.a. Sobi, Mary Berry, Wakahula, and Zaid Ida. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/FlipScreenGames. You are the realest of the real. Pretty much all of you have been supporting us since the very first month that we kicked things off. So thank you all so much for riding and dying with us. If you want to get involved, head over to flipscreen.games. That's the website. You can find links to our Patreon, to our second YouTube channel, to our Twitch channel, to a bunch of stuff. We've got content all over the web. Wherever you want to get involved, however you choose to come and hang out with us, you will find a link for it there, flipscreen.games. Come join the Discord, right into the show. Come be a part of it. We'd love to have you. And I'm going to use this opportunity to tease a brand new show coming to the slate. We are going to have more information about it when I come back from my trip, but we are going to be doing the first ever FlipScreen Games book club, where we are going to be playing Persona 5 Royal alongside both Chewy and Sierra from Nintendo Noise, as well as some members of the community. So all throughout 2023, the goal is essentially going to be once per month, we'll do an extra episode of the book club, of the game club. And you can kind of play along with us over the course of 2023, and or take it at your own pace and just listen when the episodes drop, right? So we decided to announce it this week because, of course, Persona 5 Royal dropping on Xbox, Steam, and Nintendo Switch tomorrow, right? Or 2 days from now by the time you're listening to this. Or I guess depending on when and where you're listening to this. It might already be out.
Already be out. Yeah.
So it's out this week,
and it seems to be very, very good. The reviews have been great, and I'm looking forward to getting back to Persona 5. And I think I was talking to Zaid about it, who's going to be joining us on the game club, and he seems to think I was at the halfway mark of the original Persona 5 content.
You were.
So I've got to get through that, and then I can finally experience the royal stuff. But I know there's a bunch of quality of life improvements. I can save anywhere I want while I'm in the overworld, which is great.
There's also new content. Like, there are new characters and things that, even though you're playing the game again, that you won't have seen, that I think will help you kind of, like, get through the stuff you know.
It's been so long since I played as well.
That too.
2016, 17. It's a long time ago.
It's fun. I'm excited about it. I don't want to talk about it too much. Like I said, we'll do a whole announcement video and everything, but it is gonna be a good group of folks. Everybody's playing it on different platforms. Zaid's playing it on PS5. You're gonna play it on Xbox. Chewy's on Xbox. I'm gonna play it on Steam Deck. Sierra's gonna grab it on Switch, I think is the plan. So it's going to be interesting, and we've got 2 people who've beaten the game, 1 person who started it and never finished it, 2 people who've never touched it. So it's like a good smattering of opinions, I think. So it should be an interesting conversation. But yeah, follow along if you're a Persona fan. Great excuse for you to play it again if you've never played it before and you've maybe heard me talk about it and want to give it a shot. Never a better time to jump in than now. So I hope you'll come join us. That's enough shilling for right now. Let's jump into the start screen, Steve. PlayStation DualSense Edge has been officially fully revealed. The controller is coming January 26, 2023. It is going to be $200 American, or let's see, £209.99 for you Brits, $39.99 for you European listeners. I don't think
€240. It's mental.
Really, yeah, rough. Then there's the replaceable sticks that we know exist, or you can get like the different styles of stick. They will be $20 in the States, $20 in the UK, $25 in Europe. It also includes a few extra little things. There's obviously the DualSense Edge. There's a USB braided cable. There's 2 standard caps, 2 high dome caps, 2 low dome caps, 2 half dome back buttons, and 2 lever back buttons, a connector housing, and a carrying case. So quite a bit comes in the package, even though it is a pretty steep asking price. Before we talk about the Xbox side of things, Steve, what did you think about this?
My initial reaction was like, holy shit, that's a lot of money. Because I think we were under the impression that they were just selling the controller on its own for like a cheaper price, and then they've not announced any of the other stuff you got with it. They've not announced the charging case. In fact, I don't even know if it is a charging case or if it's just
I believe it's just a carrying case. It doesn't say anything about it being a charging case.
Unlike the Elite controller, which charges in the case, it's really, really cool. This looks like it just plugs in as normal. I think the controller looks cool. I really like the new color treatment with the black on the trackpad and like the glossy black, and it's cool that the actual units of the sticks can come out, which theoretically is a band-aid solution on stick drift. I think I would have preferred them. Like, if this was a £200, £210 controller, I'd expect like Hall effect sensors in the sticks, because this is like a problem that's been solved by third-party controllers, where there's no drift in this controller because it uses magnets instead of a physical connection.
It is cool that there are dead zones too. Like, you can affect how much the triggers get clicked and everything. Like, there's some it's some good functionality, but.
Yeah. I mean, it apes pretty much what Microsoft's done, right? You got the different things on the triggers, the different tensions on the sticks, the
control profiles.
Yeah, I would have liked to have seen an adaptable D-pad as well, something that Microsoft offers, where you've actually got, because that's one thing I think that Sony's never quite got right, is the D-pad.
I'm watching the video right now. It does look like you can feed the charger through the case. So it is a charging case, I think.
That's a weird solution.
Oh, no, you know what? It looks like... I can't really tell. It looks like
that's not what I would consider a charging case. Like, the charging case for the
charges itself.
For the Xbox It's like it's got like a magnetic connection on the back, and you stick the controller in the case, and you plug the case in,
Right.
and then it's nicely controlled, like it's all neatly packaged, and it's really really nice.
So I think this seems like maybe not so bad though, right? Because like it also has a lock, so like you can feed it through, plug it in, and then lock it. And the only way to take the cable out is to click the unlocks. Like it should work that way.
I mean, fair enough. That's a minor thing because that for me is not the biggest issue with this. The biggest issue is the pricing.
Yeah, the
I
price
think the
point's pretty
pricing
high.
is way off, way off. Especially when you compare it to, like, you can compare it to the normal Elite controller, which I think comes in at 160. No, 180. It comes in at 180. So it's only $20 more than that, right?
180 American.
Yeah.
You should clarify, just because we've been giving prices in every.
Oh, I think we've only done US dollars though. Everything else is like different currency. But yeah, 180 American. So it's only 20 US dollars off that price. But Microsoft's just come out with the Series 2 Core, and I think that is in direct response to people just balking at the price of the Elite controller because they just can't afford it, or it comes with stuff they don't need. Do you really need this many sticks? Like 2 standard caps, 2 high dome caps, 2 low dome caps, and 2 half dome like buttons?
No, you
Do
probably
need
want
all
one
that?
set.
No, you don't. You want one set. So like that's what the Xbox solution gives you with the Series 2 Core, which comes in at $130. Is a much better price point. And I just, for £210, my mind was blown. It was like, for another £40 I can buy an entire Xbox Series S.
Yeah, but I saw you make that comparison, and that to me feels like a weird call out to be like, oh, they're so out of touch because of this. It's like, yeah, but the
This is
Xbox
half
Series
the
S
price
is budget.
of a PlayStation 5. It's like half the price of a PlayStation 5 for a controller.
Is it? What is it? It's
£210. It makes it £420. I think the digital edition in the UK is around about that.
okay. Yeah, because in the States the PS5 is $500, so it's like it's not quite that. I'm not.
The digital's $450, right? I mean, you're $50 off the price of an entire PlayStation, which comes with a controller. It's like, does this offer that much additional value?
Not $50 off of a PlayStation, off of an Xbox. You're saying, right? The Series S.
Yeah.
But to me, it's like I don't think that those are comparable. The person that buys a Series S is not buying a $200 premium controller.
Maybe you're right.
You know,
I mean, I'd love to know. I'd love to know who's buying this because I just that's a lot. That's a lot of money to spend on a controller.
If I'm honest with you, it's just funny to me because like I think that they're all overpriced. Like I think the Xbox controller is way too much money. So the idea that it's like
the core one, I actually think is a decent price. If this had come out at the same
$130 for a controller,
yeah, and like I don't understand the US versus UK pricing. I know the US one probably doesn't have tax included, but then the American price for the Elite doesn't have tax included, but it's still cheaper in the UK. It's just very strange. It's like they are shafting every market other than America right now. America's the only one that didn't get a price increase on the PS5. You've got the cheapest DualSense Edge pricing. I just don't get it.
I think it's because we're the biggest market.
Yeah, maybe you're right. And I just like, it seems like complacency, and it seems like they're out of touch with what consumers are wanting. I think people want a more premium controller. I don't think people want to spend £210 on it.
So I don't know. I want to just be clear. None of what I've said is to defend either anybody. I think these controllers are overpriced, period. But I've always thought they were overpriced, and weirdos bought them, right? So, like, I don't know. I don't know if $200 is too much. I really don't. Like, is there a PlayStation gamer that's like, yeah, whatever, fuck it? Or, like, you wait for a sale and it costs the same amount.
Will be, yeah. Yeah, it's not going to cost the same amount. How much is a base one? It's like $60, right?
There's but imagine
down to 60.
Imagine the Edge goes on sale for $50 off. At some point.
$50 off is what it should cost out of the box.
No, that's my point,
out
though,
of the gate,
right?
Yeah.
It's like if you can get it on a sale, you'll be spending the same amount as this. And I bet you there are a lot of people that pull the trigger with that in mind, where they're like, oh, 150, okay. I think that's ridiculous. I wouldn't pay $130 for the core either. Like, And one thing I'll say Xbox definitely has over PlayStation is that you can make these in design labs, and they're like marginally more expensive. So you can also make a custom, super expensive high-end controller, which if I was going to invest in a controller like this, I'd be more willing to do it knowing I can make it a one-of-a-kind to me rather than, I'm paying $200 for what is essentially a better version of a controller I already have.
Yeah, it's an extra in the UK. It's an extra £10 on the price of the base controller.
Right.
I think it's extra $10 in America, and that is a good price for something that's completely custom and unique to you. And you've chosen the color of the controller, the buttons, the D-pad.
It's certainly easier to swallow, I think. I personally still think it's like it's a little tough for me because it's like you could just make a regular controller with all those customizations, and it's like. Let's get to some of the audience here because there are a lot of interesting opinions here. Matthew Murphy wrote in and said, I guess I'm kind of confused at the point of a $200 controller unless it's molded specifically for my hands for max comfort. It just doesn't make sense to me. That's largely how I feel about these controllers as a whole, is that like I don't understand what they give people that they think is worth them. And I've played on them. I played on the original Elite at my cousin's house. And I just was like...
It doesn't even feel like they're that much better built.
No.
I see a lot of people complaining about those especially original Elite just falling apart, like the rubber grips coming off and like the sticks breaking.
And it's
like
just
the sticks still suffer with drift, and like I get that the PlayStation thing has a solution for that, but that just seems like a band-aid. So every single time one of my sticks drift, I got to pay 20 quid to swap out a single stick.
I struggle with that too, because it's like, I don't know, dude. Like you and I are on this fucking podcast. I play a lot of video games. Right? Like, I know I'm not like fucking MLG, like playing every single second of every day like some folks are, but like, I play a lot of video games. And I have not had a single problem with my launch controllers for either console. Like, and not that they don't exist, but it's like people being like, oh,
you were also in that camp for Joy-Con for a very long time, and it could just be that you're lucky.
I guess.
Because I know Tamberwolf in the Discord has had this problem with her
drift, yeah,
DualSense,
yeah, and again, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it's like I think drift is different than like people who are like, oh, the rubber's coming off. It's like what are you doing in this controller?
Was an actual problem on the original PS4. The glue was not used. I think they ended up replacing people's controllers for free because there was issues with the glue.
I mean, I guess, again, right? I still have my launch DualSense, and the goddamn nubs are, like, worn down, but they're still on, like... I don't know.
Yeah.
I think people are rough with controllers in a way that I am not, and it's always odd to me how common.
Possibly, but I mean, I don't know. I think there is a serious problem, especially with the Joy-Con. I don't think anyone can deny that drift is
Joy-Con drift is a fucking problem, right? Like,
and it seems like it is creeping in on other consoles, and yeah, this stick solution is a solution, but. My God, like I don't want to be paying $40 to replace out both sticks. It's like I could just get a new PlayStation 5 controller and I get everything with it, like a new battery, new buttons, like new housing, everything comes complete. So another $20 on top of that. And I'm not spending the $200 up front for this. And like, don't get me wrong, I love the stuff that it offers. I sold on back buttons. I think every controller should have them by default. I think they're great. The Steam Deck has sold me on them, and more recently the Steam controller. I really, really enjoy back buttons. They like make gaming so much easier when I'm like running and I need to. In Horizon was a great example, right? You're running and you want to be able to do health or change take potions or whatever you want to do, or drop you press the down button to drop a trap. You can do that if you allocate like the D-pad buttons to the back buttons. You can do that, and it worked so good when I was playing Horizon on the Steam Deck. That's the kind of thing that the DualSense Edge will offer. I just there's no way I can comprehend spending £210 on it. No way.
Jordan LaRose wrote in and said, expensive but looks cool. Likely gonna grab one.
And great, I'm sure this is for some people, and more power to you if this is what does it for you. But for me, there's no way I can. I look at that and I just can't get out of my head that that's almost half the price of the PS5.
And then Dragon Hayabusa followed up, said the same thing that I said. It's like, for the DualSense, I'll be getting a PS5 soon. I can wait for it to go on sale. And if it don't, then it is what it is.
Yeah, I just don't see that it's going to go on sale enough for me. It's not going to come down in price enough.
I think it will on holidays. Like I could see that being like next on Black Friday it's down. All right, maybe, you know, like the way that like we had that big that deal with the Series S at Target recently where it was like, "Oh, hey, like it's down to 200, you know, or 250 or whatever, right?" And it's like that's a quarter off. 25% off is not that much to ask for, you know, like in a big sale like that, especially if people are getting scared off by the sticker price and they're not buying them as much as they want, you know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, maybe you're right. I just think now that I've seen this though, I am changing my mind on the price of PSVR 2, and I actually think it's going to well exceed the price of the PlayStation 5.
Oh yeah, I think so. Well, we'll see. I think it'll either be the exact same price or a little bit more.
I think it's going to be 600 at least.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Andy Rads wrote in and said, "What?" And we thought a Steam Deck was expensive, or Steam Dock was expensive. They're bonkers, but some will buy it. Yeah, I mean, see, we have 2 people already who are writing in being like, "I'll buy one." And then Ray from the community said, "Is this an out of season April Fool's joke? Should I buy 2 controllers or 1 PS5?" Look, all right, moneybags. If you think you can afford 2 of these controllers, then you can afford a PS5, all right? That's all I'm saying. You know, it's one of those things where I think it's so funny because we had this whole debate when you were like, why isn't the God of War controller the Pro model? It's like, this is why. Because this is a premium product for people that are willing to spend way too much money on things they do not need. And I mean that with no shade. If you want this, if you think these are cool, all power to you.
Yeah, but I think but if I'm spending 210 quid, I want it to be themed a little bit more differently than it looks like a slightly nicer DualSense. Like I would love to have this. Like if it combined the fact that it looks really fucking cool, like the God of War themed stuff, plus the fact that
you'd still say it was too much money.
Cool stuff.
If this was $200 and it was just purple with the God of War logo on it, would you really think that was like how much of a difference would that make? Really?
It wouldn't make that much difference. It wouldn't make that much difference at all. Like I think it's too much. But we'll have to wait and see. Well, I await reviews with bated breath. I don't at this point see myself getting one.
No,
anytime soon.
I don't think I'll ever buy one of these controllers unless there's like a really good deal. The one thing I did look at though, because like we talked about potentially getting Elites that were like monogrammed at one point. They don't have yellow.
No, like the close is that weird
orange,
like, off orange.
So I'm out. I'm done. They fucked me. If they had our yellow, I would do it. But oh well.
Yeah, because it would have been perfect yellow and black. Because you can't color the grips on that. And
right.
It would look so good.
It would be awesome if I could do that. I would. But oh well.
I never got a Design Lab controller. I don't think I ever will really. But yeah, it's interesting.
I have an Xbox One Design Lab one that I built as a PC controller back when I was PC gaming, and it's like orange and white, and it has my gamer tag on it and stuff. It's like it says Lad Pete. And I'm like, oh, this is cool.
Yeah, they are really cool, and you know, I actually think I do think at some point we will get color versions of the DualSense Edge, like we've got color versions of the actual DualSense.
Probably.
It seems like custom versions of the consoles are probably a way of the past though, because they also announced this week the camouflage. I can't remember what they call them, but the plastic clip on things for your actual PlayStation.
Yeah,
so
the like housing
branching out. Yeah, they're branching out into like panels. I think they call them. They're branching out into to different territories, not just color now. There's like patterns.
They're doing a God of War one too, I think.
Yeah, I could see that being the solution rather than custom consoles, which I actually quite like. I do think that's a good solution.
Yeah, it's cool.
It reminds me of the face plates from the original Xbox 360.
Yeah, it's neat. I do kind of like the custom console thing. Like, we did our collectibles episode last week, and you can see behind me my Spider-Man PS4 Pro. I think it's just so cool. It's the only one I own, but it's very sick. Had to pull the trigger on that one. But I mean, speaking of pulling the triggers, let us know if you're planning on picking one of these bad boys up. I would love to. I'd love to hear the argument from somebody who's used one for an extended period of time about why you feel it's worth the investment. Or is it more just like a cool thing that you want to have? Because that's totally legitimate, right? Like that's a totally legit reason to buy something.
Yeah, I think we demonstrated last week that we spend money on nonsensical things at times in the collectible episode. So
it's shit everywhere, whatever. But that's enough of that for now. Let's jump into our talking point this week. Is 30 frames per second no longer acceptable? And could the Xbox Series S be part of the problem? An interesting debate. So, this story kicked off this week because WB Games Montreal, the team behind Gotham Knights, made a post on their official Discord that was talking about how the game will run at 30 frames per second on PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. This comes from Floor Marty from the team over there, and they posted, "Hello everyone. I know many of you are wondering about the availability of a performance mode for Gotham Knights on consoles. Due to the types of features we have in our game, like providing a fully untethered co-op experience in our highly detailed open world, it's not as straightforward as lowering the resolution and getting a higher FPS. For this reason, our game does not have a performance/quality toggle option and will run at 30 FPS on all consoles." So that obviously set the world ablaze. Many folks very upset about this. I think even myself, right? I chimed in on this controversy, and for me, the thing that bothers me more than the fact that the game will run at 30 frames per second is not detailing that until right now when the game is imminent. Feels like a bait and switch. It feels like you were trying to hide that information because you knew people would be upset about it. And if you had been transparent from the beginning and like talked about this and maybe even done like a breakdown about why this is the way you're going, like I could see people reacting differently. But to only share it on your private Discord, right, rather than like in a public facing way is like you're clearly trying to skirt by this and hope that it won't matter when it does to a lot of people.
I wonder if they just didn't know what they were targeting, though. I mean, I guess they knew a while back, but I don't know. Yeah.
So that wasn't where the story stopped. A senior character technical artist at Rocksteady, whose name is Lee Devenald, came to Twitter to respond to the kind of fan backlash to what was going on. Unfortunately, the series of tweets has since been deleted, and Devenald has left Twitter because people were, aggressively in their mentions, which is not cool. But I will say this, worth pointing out, right? Rocksteady, the original team who did the Arkham series, they have no connection to this game aside from the fact that they share the same parent company. So came to the defense of a sister studio, but not somebody who's working on the game. Worthwhile. So Devenald said, and I'm quoting his tweets because I did save the copy before they were deleted. "I wish gamers understood what 60 FPS means in terms of all the things they lose to make the game run that fast, especially taking into account that we have a current gen console that's not much better than a last gen one." And then in a response, somebody responded to that bit of it, and he replied and said, "Series S GPU mostly. Multi-platform games always have to optimize for the lowest performer. The Series," and then somebody else responded and said that, like, the Series S is obviously more powerful than an Xbox One. And he said the Series S exists, or they said the Series X is more powerful, excuse me. And he said the Series S exists, though, and Microsoft won't let you launch one without the other. An entire generation of games hamstrung by that potato. And before I let you off the bench, Steve, because I know you have some thoughts here, he is not the first developer to raise concerns about the Series S and how it could hamper game design. I have a couple other quotes I'm pulling here from WCCFtech.com, who had a great article on the subject and pulled some good contextual quotes. So we had id Software's lead engine programmer, Billy Kahn, who talked about the Series S when it was revealed back in 2020 and said that the memory situation was going to be a major issue. They also had for id's principal engine programmer Axel, Gniting, I'm going to guess is how you say their last name. Apologies if that's incorrect, Axel. But both of them said that the console, and specifically the amount of RAM inside the Series S, would be hard to compensate. From Axel, he said, also, it's always scaled on PC is nonsense. He's saying the argument that those things are always scaled on PC is nonsense. Every AAA game in the past decade or so has had their assets made once so that they run on minimum spec. Increasing sample counts a bit here and there for high settings isn't what you could truly have done with more power. Minimum specs matters. And then Billy added and said, the memory situation is a big issue on the S. The much lower amount of memory and the split memory banks will drastically slower speeds and will be a major issue. Aggressively lowering the render resolutions will marginally help, but will not completely counteract the deficiencies. And then shortly after launch, we had this comment from Remedy's Thomas Pua, who said that the console was nowhere, that optimization for the Series S was nowhere near as simple as lowering things like rendering resolution or texture quality. A little bit before that, we had an interview. They had an exclusive interview with 4A Games Chief Technical Officer Alexander. I'm so sorry because I'm butchering these last names, but Shishkovstov, hopefully. Sorry, Alexander. Who said that the RAM wasn't the issue, but that the GPU performance would be a problem. And then earlier this year, we had Dying Light 2 came out, and I know that was a game that also had some frame rate problems. I guess problems in quotes, eye of the beholder. But their lead designer, Timon Smektala, said that the Series S was what held Techland back from going beyond 30 FPS in that game as well. So there's a whole other story about frame rates this week. But before we get to that, I want to let Steve come off the bench here. What do you think about this? Because you, for a long time, have talked about the Series S as this really, really great value that Xbox is offering, as a really compelling argument for picking up an S instead of a PS5 if you don't care about 4K resolution, or if you want to play Xbox exclusives on a console but don't want to shell out for two full-price consoles. You know, we've talked a lot about the value that it provides, and that aside from its inability to match up when it comes to resolution and stuff like that, that a lot of the interiors of the consoles are the same. So hearing from all of these folks talking about this, what's your interpretation of that?
I think it only solidifies that it's good value to me. You know, it runs at 30 frames per second on, like, if we're looking at Gotham Knights, for example, runs at 30 FPS on all consoles, and the seemingly only difference is resolution. I would imagine there's probably other differences that we'll see as people explore the game, but I don't know. I mean, fair enough. I'm not a developer. I'm not working with these units, but I don't know that I agree with Axel's, like, it's always scaled on PC thing, you know? Like the equivalent GPU of a Series S is like a GTX 1060 or I think a Radeon 5500 XT. Those are fairly modern cards. Like, there's a lot of people that still have a 10 series card in their PC and are going to be using that. But the difference is PC gives you choice, and it seems like the thing with Gotham Knights is they're not willing to give people the choice. Like, we saw that argument from the Rocksteady artist, and like, fair enough, people don't know what the compromises are to get 60 FPS. Let them see it. Let them see the compromises. Let them switch between a performance and a quality mode.
And to me, that is where I take the most issue with what's been said. as far as the rest of the comments about the Series S hampering like the top level of what you're able to do, fair enough, and like that might be obvious as we get deeper into this generation, right? However, I think where I get tripped up with his argument is the whole, I wish gamers understood what FPS means in terms of all the things they lose to make the game run that fast, right? And they talk about in the initial post from WB Montreal, they're like, our highly detailed open world. What does that mean? Right? Because like
I don't know.
As somebody who just finished doing a replay of Spider-Man Remastered, right? That is seemingly a similar game, right? Superhero game, similar battle system, similar, you would imagine, traversal experience of the open world, all that good stuff. How dense is this world that they're making that they can justify that, we couldn't possibly make this compromise without,
I actually think Miles Morales is a better comparison because that came out as a cross-gen title on PS4 and PS5. And if you're saying that the Series S is just the same as an Xbox One, which is nonsensical, I mean, maybe it's closer to a One X than any other console, but there's still a significant power in there. The pipeline of loading of assets in because of the SSD is going to be significantly better. And I think that's the Spider-Man comparison is great because it ran at like 30 FPS on PS4, but the PS5 gives you options. And it gives you options of 30, 60. I think there's even a 120 option in there, but there's definitely now a 40 FPS option, and that's an option that we're seeing more and more in games. And I think we'll talk about it when we in a little bit of this week. We saw Plague Tale Requiem has a 40 FPS option for people with 120 hertz panels, and obviously we've played 40 FPS on Steam Deck. It works great, and it actually feels like a really good compromise. I
definitely
think
better than 30, right? Like it makes a difference for sure. And that's the thing, right? That game also has and sorry to cut you off, but that game also has a compromised ray tracing version where it's like, hey, like you can get ray tracing and it will be 60 FPS, but we'll limit the amount of like people on the ground, like crowd density will be lowered and things like that. And it's like, okay, like if you care about that, then that's a good compromise, And it's like, to me, this feels like you didn't want to do that work. And you're like, well, our world is so detailed we couldn't possibly. And it's like, I don't know. Like, I obviously have to get my hands on the game before I can comment on that.
Like, and like you look at what Nixie's has done with Spider-Man, it scales all the way up to like running on a 4090 at like ridiculous 200 frames per second with DLSS 3 and like all of this other crazy stuff.
And what about that world density are you losing out on because of that? I don't see it. I don't see that. And it's hard for me to hear that argument and be like, this is why. Yeah. And it's like, there are plenty of really dense open world games that run at 60 FPS. I played a couple of them in the last 2 years.
Like, I really struggle with it as well because, yeah, you do need to kind of work to the lowest common denominator at some point. But if you say, right, we're targeting 60 on these higher end consoles, but 30 on the Series S, it's what, two SKUs you've got to adapt for. You've got to have performance settings in there for a Series X and a PS5 because they'll be running on the exact same, and you've got to have settings in there for Series S. Unlike a PC where you've got to cater for thousands of various combinations of this person might have a really high-end CPU, but they've not got much RAM installed in that system, or they've got a crazy GPU, but it's being bottlenecked by the CPU, and they've got settings to cater for all of that. I don't see it myself, and I actually, I did find myself getting annoyed by the thread that I know Lee's deleted, but it's like, I don't know. That comes across as a little bit arrogant you guys don't know you gamers don't know anything. You don't know what you're talking
Yeah.
about. This is why we can't do it.
And it's
just
like, don't get me wrong, that's true in a lot of scenarios, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, look at the latest stuff with GTA 6.
Graphics
like,
are the first thing done. Yeah, like shut the fuck up, right? Like there are a lot of gamers that don't know what the fuck they're talking about. But like when you're talking about frame rate, which is something that's like measurable and like we can look at it and see that there are multiple huge open world, big budget games that came out in the last 2 to 3 years since these consoles launched that have had big, lush, dense open worlds that ran at 60 FPS. Horizon does that. And it's like...
Yep, and Horizon is able
also
to
runs
run
on
at
PS4.
60 FPS. Right, but it runs at 60 FPS on PS4 Pro. So, like, there was already that, like, interim of, we kind of are scaling. Because both of the last-gen consoles had those mid-gen refreshes with the One X and the PS4 Pro. It doesn't look like we're going to get that this time around. Because, I don't necessarily think we need it. We're 2 years in, and I don't think we've even scratched the surface of what's possible. If anything, I actually think it's the last gen that's holding back where we are currently. And I don't know.
But how do you justify that with, like, because, like, Dying Light didn't come out on last gen, did it?
Dying Light 2, I think, did.
Did it?
Yeah.
Let's find out.
I mean, I might be mistaken, but I'm sure Dying Light 2 did.
Dying Light 2. It did come out on PS4 and Xbox One. Yeah, so there you go. So how are you gonna sit here and say?
How are you saying the Series S?
The Series S is the problem. It's like, what do you mean you made a 30 FPS version? Just run that version on the S then. And I don't know. Yeah. I also want to just clarify, like, neither of us are game developers, so there's probably a level of ignorance to what we're saying here, and I fully acknowledge that. I am the first one to admit what I do not know, but this feels like such a tough argument for me to swallow. But I don't know, because it's like some of the games we're thinking of are exclusives, right? So it's like maybe it's easier to get it to run in an optimal way on PS4 and, PS5 rather than S, X, and PS5. And
I don't know about that.
I don't know.
I really don't. I mean, they basically use the same chipset across both. I mean, I know you're working in different SDKs. I actually think Microsoft does a really great job from what I understand in terms of their SDK. They have one SDK for all of their systems, so you use the same thing for Xbox One all the way up to the Series X. Mm-hmm. And the console holding people back if they're doing cross-gen is the original Xbox One. It was underpowered compared to the PS4. And that thing's holding things back. I just don't see why you can't say, right, this runs at 30 FPS on Series S, which we've seen with games. Halo Infinite, for example, runs at 30 on that console. It doesn't run at 60, or it might run at 60, but it doesn't have a 120 hertz mode.
Right.
And we've got this great compromise that we first saw in Ratchet and Clank on PS5, where tons of people have 120 hertz displays now. I'm one of them. You're one of them. If you've bought a modern TV in probably the last 3 to 5 years, you've probably got a 120 hertz display, and you can take advantage of that. It's not like we were stuck in it's 60 hertz, so the lowest we can go is 30 hertz. We've got 120 hertz to play with. We can do any divisible of that, and 40 hertz gets you so close to that 60 hertz feeling that you get.
And that is a great transition into story number 2 on this 30 FPS takedown we have here. Gotham Knights, of course, not the only one to make negative headlines. Plague Tale Requiem, as you said, Steve, has had its advanced reviews drop this week, and while many outlets have certainly enjoyed the game, there are a number of folks that are not happy about its performance. One of them being Jordan Midler of Video Games Chronicle, who gave the game 2 out of 5 stars and specifically called out that it, quote-unquote, runs like garbage on PS5. There is an early tech analysis available of the game that comes from, I believe it's Analista Daybits. It's a Spanish language Twitter account, so, grain of salt for that one. But it was translated by Mr. Nibelian, at Nibelian on Twitter, Nibble, of course, I'm sure an account you're familiar with. And the game runs, we got a breakdown of how it runs on the current gen consoles. PS5 is hitting 1440p, 30 FPS, Xbox Series X, 1440p, 30 FPS. Xbox Series S is 1080p, 30 FPS. But all three of those systems can run the game at around a 40 FPS mode if you play it in 120 hertz mode. So,
what do you mean by around? Are they uncapped frame rates?
That's what I'm guessing, because it's the tilde, right? Which generally means around. It's targeting this, but I don't think it would be locked 40. That's how I'm interpreting it.
Yeah, but that's interesting. Usually, like, you would go 40 FPS is like where you go. They're like targeting that. I would really like to see more games on, especially on the Xbox side. In fact, the PlayStation now as well, right? Because they've got VRR support.
Worth pointing out, the game does support VRR as well.
Yeah, so that's fun. So and it looks like it's got an uncapped frame rate. There's some additional people. The Xbox tester over on Twitter has posted that there's just an uncapped mode. It runs at 44 to 45 FPS on Series S.
Pretty good. So to give you a little bit more context, the Xbox Series X version seems to be the most stable. PS5 has performance issues, specifically with open areas with rats. The S has some clipping issues, some textures, vegetation, draw distance, reflections, the kind of compromises I think you'd expect, right? It's
Those
interesting.
are also the kind of things that can be improved with updates, you know?
Sure.
As more and more people play it and they get more and more things that they analyze. But it looks like, if you can, the place to play this is on PC. I mean, fuck me, 160 FPS average on,
it says
on
here,
a 4090.
PC version has a ray tracing patch coming in soon. If you, it's one of the first games with DLSS 3 plus frame generation for the RTX 40. So with that, you can hit 160 FPS on average if you set things to ultra, which is crazy.
Yeah, I mean, that technique is insane. I actually don't think it's necessary if you're hitting at 160 with DLSS 3 and frame generation. You probably don't even need the frame generation to hit 120. Sure. I was listening to Digital Foundry's DF Direct Weekly this week, and Richard Ledbetter over there made like a really good statement about the RTX 4090. It was just like, we've solved frame rates with the 4090. You just like put it on ultra, you don't even need to think about it. It's going to work. When it comes to rasterized stuff, when it comes to ray tracing, there's still a lot of work there. But when it comes to rasterized stuff, if you play it on a 4090, it's gonna look great regardless. The frame rate is gonna be fine. But I think if I'm planning on playing this game because it's on Game Pass.
Plague Tale?
And yeah, Plague Tale. So I plan on checking it out, and VRR mode's the way to go, I think, in pretty much all games, if you can get it. If it's not going to hit a solid 60, but you can average fluctuate between 40 and 60, then that's the route to go.
That's not too bad.
I see no issue with it. The fact that they've given us the option to uncap the frame rate and it seems like the compromise is,
if you have a display that supports
fidelity,
you have to have that 120 hertz display.
Yeah, but I think we're in a transition period. Do you remember when the 360 came out and it didn't initially come with like the cables? Yeah, it didn't come with HDMI because it was like it was still in that era where not everyone's got an HD TV. I think we're in that transition period where people are looking and probably going to upgrade, but not everyone's got a 4K TV or a panel that supports 120 hertz or VRR or whatever. I think those people probably don't care if it's running at 1080p 30 frames per second.
It's like buck
I think
wild.
Unless you're watching comparison videos, you're probably not going to tell the difference when you're playing this and it's locked at a solid 30.
Especially if that's what
the
you're
kind of
used
game
to.
that needs that performance. Yeah, exactly. You're used to it. And I don't think it's also the kind of game, unlike Gotham Knights, for example, where you're going to have that fast-paced action and you're moving around like Spider-Man. You probably will notice.
I could see that being a problem with this game, though, because of the number of assets on the screen. Because that's often a thing that will make frame rate stutter when you have like a ton of models.
That's probably why they can't hit 60, because the number of rats in these games is just insane.
It's like, how do you do that, right? Like that could be tough. So we've touched on a lot of the questions I wanted to discuss here, but the one I want to posit before we get out of here, Steve, is looking at these two stories, right? Obviously remains to be seen how these games actually perform when they come out. But what do you think this means for 30 frames per second gaming? Like, are we at a point where like it's done? Like, are gamers over it? Can we no longer tolerate it?
I think if that's the case, then get off a console, because we're 2 years into this console life cycle now. We started the last generation with like guns blazing out the gate, 60 FPS. You know, we had Assassin's Creed Unity with an uncapped frame rate. It was nonsense. And I feel like we started this generation strong with like, yeah, we can hit 60 FPS and all this performance stuff. If you want games to have that generational leap in terms of graphical fidelity that we want as gamers, we want to see, we want to push for it, right? I think you're sorely mistaken that 30 frames per second is the way of the past. I think this is now probably the future going forwards, that more and more games are going to target 30, and we're probably going to see 40 as that like, or can we hit 40 FPS?
I'm interested because I'm not totally sold. Because I gotta be honest with you, right? And I no shade to either of these studios or anything like that. But I look at these games, and these are not games that I look at as benchmarks of graphical fidelity, right? Like I say this with so much love, right, for Rocksteady and what they did with the Arkham series. I love Batman, love those games. I have never seen Gotham Knights and thought that game's going to be great, right? Every time I've seen it, there's been cautious optimism at best. And now I'm at a point where I'm like, I don't even think I'm going to pick it up, right? Because it's like everything they've told me about it has been like, this is worse. This is not what I want, right? And I think the 30 FPS is kind of the nail in the coffin for me of like, oh, we made this compromise so you can play multiplayer. And it's like, well, I don't want to play multiplayer ever. So great. So I wonder, right? Like, will we see the games that you think of as being like the benchmarks, right? Like the big PlayStation exclusives, or like the really, like, I'm trying to think of a good example from Xbox, but those types of those marquee experiences, are they still going to hit?
I could quite easily see the like PlayStation single player action narrative games becoming 30 FPS. No question. Maybe the bigger open world
could happen.
Multiplayer games stick at 60. But I can see the next Naughty Dog game where they want it to look like you're watching a movie, playing out at a max of 40, or they just were like, here's an uncapped version.
See, but that's the thing is, I think 40, I don't know. Like, if 40 is the minimum that we agree to, I think that's chill, but like, I don't know, dude.
You can't have 40 the minimum because there's so many 60 hertz panels out there.
Yeah.
They're still the standard. So you have to have a 30 mode in there, and then 40 if it's in a 120 hertz mode. 60 is a big stretch, that's double the performance. It's not like a 20% increase. It's we've got to have a 100% increase. It's huge. It's a big ask.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, because I really do think people are kind of hitting a breaking point with it, and I think more people that used to not care are spoiled now, because I feel that way.
And I think maybe those people are going to be the ones that have to go to PC if they want that. Because I don't think the consoles we've got are powerful enough. I really don't. I think the ray tracing is a fantasy on console. It's just not
I don't care about that at all, though. Like, I got to be honest with you. Ray tracing, I think, was
now,
way
say
oversold as something that was going to matter.
Or 4 years down the line, I actually think ray tracing is the future of gaming, and I see more and more games that are going to target it. They want global illumination in there, for example. It's a staple of Unreal Engine 5 with Lumen, and I can't see how many Unreal Engine 5 games are going to run at more than 30 FPS on these current gen consoles. It's not going to happen.
I guess we'll see. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, especially if we do get that refresh at some point. And like, what is that?
I also don't see that that's going to happen. We had a die shrink on the PS5, and we didn't even get a case revision to make it smaller.
Yeah, but I don't think that's the same thing, right? Like,
I don't know that we're going to get a mid-gen refresh, because I don't think with the current market it's economically viable. I think it will make the console more expensive, and I don't think people are willing to pay.
So, I think we're way too early like, I don't personally agree.
Next year, if you're going on the timeline of the last gen console.
That's not true.
It's
The
3 years
PS4 Pro
into the
didn't
life
come out in
cycle.
2017, did it?
Yeah.
It did? 2017?
I'm sure it did, yeah.
I thought I got it in
Yeah, it was like around the... No, it was around the same time as the Switch came out.
No, really? I might just
Yeah.
have my timeline off here. Are you looking it up?
Yeah, I actually think it's PS4 Pro.
Let me see. Release date. Oh, it looks like it came out in 2016. So that would have been
Yeah, it was 3 years into the life cycle.
Yeah,
of
so
the
it would be
console.
next year.
So it's next year, and there's no way next year we're getting a new version.
No,
of
that's
these consoles.
too soon. But
People still haven't got an original version of the PS5 because they can't get a hold of them.
But think about it this way. That console had a shorter life cycle. If this console cycle is going to emulate the last time we saw this economic situation, the life cycle would be longer. Because the PS3 and the Xbox 360 went a few years longer than the average console cycle. They made it, I think it was 8 years.
8 years. Yeah, it's only 1 year longer than the last gen.
Is that true?
Yeah, it was 7 years. It was to 2020.
Yeah, it was pretty long, I guess. Huh.
So it's 1 year extra, and bear in mind the PS3 came out a year after the Xbox 360, so that actually only did have 7 years on it.
Yeah.
Whereas the Xbox 360 came in 2005, so that did go a little longer, but the PS3 didn't, and that was what held that generation back. I just don't see that.
It feels
we're
way
going to
too
get
soon.
that mid-gen
Yeah,
refresh this time.
I think you're
it
right.
It does feel way too soon.
It feels way too soon, but
because we've still got cross-gen titles coming out. We're not
so
in that.
Think about
era
it that
yet.
way, though, right? Like if maybe this console cycle goes even longer than that, right? Maybe it's 10 years, and then we get the midway refresh at 5 years in, or something like that.
Maybe, but then I also kind of feel that that's like what happens with the Series S at that point? Do you just stop supporting it? Because then that is a conversation of, if we're still supporting the Series S, that is the thing that's like holding the generation back at that point.
I mean, that's a Microsoft problem, I'd argue.
Well, it's a Microsoft problem, but if you're also a studio that wants to support all of the SKUs out in the wild, and if the Series S is the console that's sold best, then we already know that in Japan, for example, that the majority of Xbox is sold there with a Series S.
Yeah, but I think
you're gonna have to support it in the
don't,
same way
though,
that
right?
there's
'Cause
people wanting to support the Switch.
Yeah, but it could be the same thing as like the way that people used to put out PlayStation 4 exclusives that were not deals, right? Where it's just like, oh, it's exclusive because that's the console that makes sense for us to target, right? Like Japanese studios, there are plenty of Japanese games that didn't have investment from PlayStation that only came to PlayStation or Switch and not Xbox, right? And if you hit a point where developers are like, well, we could make an Xbox version, but we have to make multiple SKUs because they decided to split the market, like maybe they just make their games PlayStation exclusive then, and then that's a feather in Sony's cap. Or you put it out on PlayStation and PC, and you say, well, if you want to play it on Xbox, you can get it on the Xbox app on PC, but we don't want to make a Series S version. That's going to limit the game.
I mean, we'll see. I don't see that happening for the big studios, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it does.
I don't know. I think we're in uncharted territory, I think is my point, right? Is that I think this generation is already abnormal.
You know, last gen was the first time we got a mid-gen refresh as well. You know, we'd never got one of those before,
except for handhelds.
Console revisions to make them smaller.
But
yeah, but not to like that extent where it's just like, this is so much extra power that we've got. You know, the handhelds had like, oh, it's now got a color screen, or now it's got a backlight instead of a front light or whatever. We never really got like to that extent where it's just like, now you can do 4K. Gaming, and it's like the graphics are like,
you had stuff with like,
you got performance improvemements.
There was like the 3DS where it was like the new
3DS.
There was that,
yeah,
but there was also the other
new
iteration
3DS.
of it where it was like, oh, it loads games faster. Like it was just like the refresh had a better chip in it and things like that. So it's like that stuff happens, but not like we saw last generation. And that part of that was because of how long the generation was. And I think that that's only going to be worse this time around because there is this, quote unquote struggle to get hands on it. But even that I actually kind of think is like a media narrative and a Twitter narrative versus reality, because we just got the news that the PlayStation 5 is the 4th fastest selling console of all time in your home country of the UK. So how hard is it to actually get one versus like...
Versus an Xbox is, there is some.
Yeah, that's because there's actual demand for the PlayStation versus the Xbox. The Xbox is number 3 in the market.
Yeah, but like compare it to last gen. 2 years into the PlayStation 4's life cycle, you just walk into any store and pick one up. It was not like this.
Yeah, but
nowhere near.
Right, you're right. But is that because there are actually less PlayStation 5s in the wild, or because the demand is higher?
I think so. Because the PS1, for example, or the Wii. Like the Wii was like the best-selling console of all time. Actually, I think it's been overtaken. But the Wii, it was the same. 2 years into its own, I could go pick one up. Was no issue.
Not totally. I mean, yeah, but like there was a pretty extended period where you had to actively work to get a Wii. I didn't get one at launch, and I looked for one for a year before I got one. So it's not unprecedented, right? This happens. And with the Wii, it was the same thing. The Wii was an extremely sought-after product in the way that the PS5 is. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. And then there's Nintendo that's the outlier, right? No one complains about 30 FPS on the Switch. Then we just accept that is what it is.
Yeah.
And in fact, they're able to target 60 on a lot of their games.
I mean, but again, you say that,
the hell out of them.
But also, I feel like that narrative is starting to turn. Because I'm seeing...
Yeah, but we're like coming up to like 8 years of the Switch, or 7 years of the Switch. It's like coming to the end of what we would consider a generation.
No, it dropped in 2016. Oh my God, that is true. Oh my God.
Yeah.
No! That's 7 years ago? Holy shit.
So it's like we're coming up to the end of the generation. At the end of the PS4, we were just like, we're eking out right now, but like we would like some extra frames in here, please. Yeah. And maybe, like we're getting...
I think we're past that on Nintendo already, where I feel like people are getting frustrated with performance on Switch, and people are less excited about playing games on Switch.
Yeah, I will. If the game's anywhere else, I would choose to play it anywhere else now, and the Steam Deck's only cemented that. Because
and it used to be the opposite.
The thing was like, I want to play it on the Switch because it's handheld. Now I don't have that necessity because there's a more powerful handheld in the market.
Right.
And I think the shift needs to swing back into Nintendo's direction and Nintendo's favor. And I think it probably will next year. I actually think probably going to get one alongside Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah, I think a new console is all they need to do to like change that perception, but I think it's time,
Yeah, 7 years later.
Yeah. It's interesting. So I don't know. It's like I see what you're saying, and I don't think it's without merit, but I also don't know that I agree that it's as cut and dry, just because I'm like, I don't know, dude. Like, I feel like we're in such uncharted waters right now, where it's like we've never had this many things impacting the market at one time like this, right? Where like you're trying to keep this last generation consoles like still limping along now that are almost 10 years old,
Yeah, and I think we was it either Herman Hulst or Jim Ryan saying that they can't forget about that audience still, like in a recent interview. It's just like, and it makes me think we're still gonna have cross-gen titles into next year. And I know we thought that God of War was probably gonna be the last one. I don't think it is. I think they've got some more up their sleeve.
I don't know.
I could see the next Spider-Man becoming cross-gen. Maybe.
I really truly don't know, and I think it's too hard to speculate because like. There's so many things that are like are variables that are hard to understand how they're going to evolve, right? Because it's like, is the chip shortage not going to be a problem next year because like crypto is tanking? Like maybe, I don't know, like there's a lot of variables that are impacting the current landscape. And I think like to speculate on how those things are going to turn out 5 years from now is like really hard to wrap your head around because you can't really look at history. Like you can, but it's like how much can we draw a straight line between what's happened before and what's happening now when there's so many more things at play than there used to be.
Yeah, it is really tough. But I think I think one thing's for certain in my mind though that 30 FPS ain't going anywhere. It's going to remain an option. in games. I would like to see more developers add more options. I think options and choices are only the way forward. Let people make that choice. If I want to compromise on shadow quality or visual fidelity or draw distance or resolution or whatever it may be, like if I want to run my Xbox game at 1080p instead of 1440p, and I can get 60 hertz instead of 30, let me do it. Just give me the option. Give me more choices. I think that's only good for gamers.
Performance mode or die. That's the only way to play now, okay? Come on. But not on a PC. Refuse. So get it together, developers. Anyway, we're going to wrap it up there for the day. Thank you guys for joining us for another episode of FlipScreen Games Podcast. I've been Pete. He's been Steve. If you want to write in and talk about all the stuff that we talked about today, flipscreen.games. That's the website. You can find links to our email address, our Discord, all kinds of good stuff. However you choose to get involved, we thank you for tuning in. We'll catch you next week for another episode of FlipScreen Games Podcast. Goodbye! I hit the musical cue too early, so now you're just going to hear my voice for a minute. It's a work in progress, everybody. All right, thank you.